In this lecture, we're going to see how you can call a JavaScript QML function from C++. Now, I don't know why you would do this because the general flow of working with Qt Quick and C++ is to do the user interface in QML and do the heavy lifting in C++. But crazy things happen, and sometimes you may need to do this if you happen to have a feature or functionality that is only available in JavaScript QML and you want to use that in C++. If you happen to need that, this is how you do it. On the C++ side, you define two things. One is the return value that you expose as a Q variant type. There's also the parameter or parameters that you're going to pass to the JavaScript function. And then you say a Q meta object invoke method. You pass in the root object where that JavaScript function is defined in the QML tree. Don't worry if you don't understand this, you're going to see how we do it. You pass in the name of the JavaScript function, and then you pass in the return value and the parameter decorated with the necessary macros. The return value is going to be decorated with QReturnArg. The parameters are going to be decorated with QArg like this. This is what you do from the C++ side, and we're going to do a demo in a moment. Don't worry. On the Qt Quick side, all you have to do is define the function, and then you're going to call it. One thing you should note is that the JavaScript function we're going to call is going to be defined at the root level of the QML file that we are going to use. The root element is this window here in our QML example file here, and the JavaScript function is going to be defined right below here at the root level. Okay, now that you have this idea, we're going to go to Qt Creator and play with us. Here we are in Qt Creator. We're going to create our project. It's going to be an application, a Qt Quick application. We're going to call it call.js from CPP demo because that's what it is. We choose our Qt version, choose our kit, and finish. We are going to create a class that is going to wrap the methods that we're going to use to do our thing here. Add new C++ class. We're going to call it QML.js_color. It's going to inherit Q object. You know this already. Finish. In the class here, we want to define a method that we are going to trigger from QML. For that to happen, we need to decorate this with the QInvocable macro. We want to put in a private section that is going to contain our private stuff. We put in a method that is going to call JS. We call it call.js method. And it's going to take a string parameter as well. Let's call this param. And we want to put in a Q object pointer that is going to be our QML root object. This is the object representing the QML item containing our JavaScript function. We want to provide a setter for this field here. So let's create a setter member function for this. Let's look in the CPP file. We have our setter here. We want to implement the CPP method. Inside the CPP method, we want to do two things. One is to debug output a statement saying what we are doing here. And then we want to call the JS method, which is what we do here. Okay, this method is implemented here. Did we spell it correct? Let's bring this back a little bit and see if this is what we have. Let's copy and paste this to be sure. Okay, this is right. In CPP method, we call JS method here, and we pass in the parameter that we got from QML when we trigger this method. You're going to see how we use this in a moment. Now, how do we call JavaScript? The first thing we need to do is to define the return value and the parameter that we are going to pass in. We do declare two variant types like this, okay, the return value and the parameter. And the parameter is going to be a variant that we build from the parameter that we got from the parameter list of the method here. And we are going to say QMeta object invoke method. We want to pass in the root object, which is going to be QML root object. We want to pass in the name of the JavaScript function. It's going to be QML JS function. This is the name. We want to put in the return value. We're going to decorate that QReturn arg. It's going to be QVariant. This is the type of the data. And next, we're going to pass in the variable that we defined on top here, returned value. We want to pass in the parameter. It's going to be QArg. It's going to be also QVariant. And it's going to wrap around the CPP parameter that we passed in here. I think this is enough. Okay, this is the syntax. All you have to do is remember it. Okay, after we do this, we put a debug statement saying what we just did and showing the returned value to be displayed here. And this is the return value that we get from QML. Remember, we call this JavaScript function to do something for us, and it's going to give us back a return value. We're going to capture that in this return value variable here and show that here. This is what we are doing. We are turning that into a string because it was a QVariant when we got that from QML. Now we have the CPP infrastructure in place. The next thing we need to do, we need to expose this class as a context property. You already know how to do this. We're going to say include QQML context. We're going to include the class QML.js color. We're going to create an instance of the class. And we are going to do something a little bit special here. Why is that? Because we need to set the root item only when the QML file here has been loaded. Notice that there is a possibility for this load method here to fail, and we know when it has failed when the root object's list here is empty. So what we're going to do, we're going to put a pair of curly braces here, return when something is wrong, when this is empty, and do an else block here. And inside here, we're going to say JS color, set root object, and say engine root objects, and pass in the first one. Okay, so we should say 0 like this, or you can even put a dot first. All these are going to work. Let's do this because it's more intuitive. And just like this, we can do our normal stuff and use our object here in QML. And I just noticed that I didn't expose anything to QML. So I need to do that. I'm going to say engine root context, set context property. We are going to call it QML.js color in the QML context. And we're going to pass in the address of JS color here. This is going to be fine. One thing you need to be sure about is that you have a root object here, because if you don't have it, you're going to have a crash because the QML engine is going to try and call stuff on the root object here, and you don't have the root object. So make sure this is here. Okay, now we can go back to QML, change the title here to say call. This will do. The first thing we need to do is to define the JavaScript function. Remember, we called it, but we haven't defined it yet. And the name of it is going to be this. So we should copy this so that we don't have any typos and say function. It should be at the root level. It's going to take a parameter. The parameter is going to say param. And the function is really doing nothing special. It is putting something to the console for us to see in QML, and it is returning some text that we should show in C++ when this function returns. Now we should provide a way to have this method called from C++. And remember, we had a method that we can call from QML, which is called CPP method. What we're going to do is to include Qt Quick controls because we're going to need a button. Let's put a button down here. It's nothing special. The ID is going to be mbutton for my button. The text is going to say call QML function from CPP, C++, and when this is clicked, we want to say what is our thing called. It is called QML JS caller, so we should call that. We say QML JS caller, and it's going to be CPP method, and we're simply going to say QML colon. Okay, just like this. So let's see what we can expect. When we click this button, we're going to call the CPP method here. It's going to put the text here, and it's going to call a method that is called call.js method. The method is here. It's going to pass in the parameter, and it's going to call JavaScript for us. And when it's done, it's going to show us the returned value from JavaScript, and we're going to end here. Okay, let's run the application. Hopefully it's going to work. And you see that we haven't included the QDebug header. We should do that. Let's run again. Okay, we have our button here. And notice when we click it, it says this is C++ token. We are calling QML, and QML gets control. You see that it says QML is token, and it's going to return something in C++. And we have C++ token again, done calling QML JavaScript. The return value is this is QML over to you, C++. And if you look in the QML file, this is what we are returning from JavaScript. And this proves that our function here is being called. This is the message that we show in here, QML token, and all the things here. And this is the parameter that was passed when we called JavaScript. And just like this, you can call JavaScript functions from C++. And this is the syntax that you use here. It's really easy. Once you know this, you can call any function that you want. And for now, you just have to make sure that the function is at the root level. In a future lecture, we're going to show you how you can do this for a function that is anywhere in your QML tree. But for now, we can only call at the root level. Okay, this is all for this lecture. I hope you know how you can call your JavaScript functions from C++. In the next lecture, we're going to revise what we just talked about in this chapter. I'll see you there.